Okay, welcome back. In this screencast, I'm talking about how to organize projects and how to name files. Where we left off last time, I was talking a little bit about how to do this. So I'd listed 3 principles that will help you when naming a file. Be nice to machines, be nice to humans, make sorting, searching easy. Okay, so let's go through each of these principles one by one. First off, what kinds of file names do machines tend to like? Machines, like computers, are not the same as people, and they don't like the same things that we like. So one principle that I think a lot of people of my generation sort of understood intuitively, because we were so used to dealing with badly designed computers. This is obvious to us, but it's not obvious to people who've grown up just expecting computers to be useful. Don't leave white space. Don't put spaces in your file names. The reason for this is that there are cases where computers don't parse blocks of text the way that you want them to. So in a programming language, it is sometimes the case that when you have a space between 2 words, this has meaning in that programming language, right? So if everything in the underlying code that's being used to work with your files is structured nicely, it won't matter that there are spaces. What I have found time and time again is that when things break, spaces in your file names can cause a whole lot of problems down the track. So if you want your file name to be robust, to play nicely with machines even when something isn't quite right, don't leave white space. So here's what I mean. So if I go Romeo and Juliet _ act1.docx, that file name has no white space in it at all. Whereas if I typed it as if it was English text, I would go Romeo space and space Juliet space act space 1.docx. The thing at the bottom, the version here that you see the cross mark next to, is bad, and it can later on, when you are working with things that might be, say, lists of file names, there are chances some things can break when you have your file name written in this form. So it is better to use underscores and hyphens to separate in places that you would normally use a space. So here is another example with Midsummer Night's Dream, where the words are all separated with hyphens, and that is better than doing it Midsummer's Night Dream with each of the words separated with a space. A related principle, or a slightly more general version of the same principle, is avoid special characters. When you have your file names, they should contain numbers, letters, hyphens and underscores, and basically nothing else. Dot you should only include as part of the file extension. So if it says .docx at the end, then that's telling you that it's a Word document. If it's .txt, it's telling you that it's a plain text file. If it's .r, it's telling you that it's an R script. That's the only place you should be using dots as much as possible. Try not to include accents. So like here, I'm showing the ñ character, which is used a lot in Spanish. And I feel uncomfortable making the advice because on the one hand, there's an accessibility issue here where people who are writing in non-English alphabets need those characters or find them useful in their everyday life. So I'm not going to quite go so far as to say never use accents, but think about anything that's outside of the very narrow parochial English language character set has a chance of causing the machine to struggle with it. So if you can avoid them, avoid accents. So here's the idea. So if I've got a file called, if I wanted to a file called what the cat, and I'm actually asking a question, what I don't want to do is include the question mark. Just say have what the cat, like I have up here in the top. Similarly, if you've got an essay, Romeo and Juliet, putting in, notice here I've got quote marks in the text here. This is bad. This can cause problems. Same thing with the, maybe not quite as bad, but it can cause problems when you've got parentheses and brackets and things like that. So try to keep your file names to letters, numbers, and a couple of specific characters that you're going to use as separators. So that is the hyphen, which is that dash, and the underscore, which is that. The reason why I say that this is a more general version of the previous rule about white space is that essentially white space, so a space between words, is often is a special character in programming languages itself. It's used to separate out different commands or something. So keep your character set, like the letters, numbers, etc., as simple as you can possibly manage. Okay. Another principle that matters a lot for helping machines not cry, they are whiny. Don't assume that, try to keep everything, my preference is keep everything lowercase. It's not always possible, but as a general rule, don't assume that the difference between uppercase and lowercase is actually meaningful. Some operating systems will treat a lowercase a and an uppercase a as the same character for the purposes of determining the file name, but other operating systems will treat them as different. So that can be a problem if somebody picks up your file and moves it across onto a different machine that's running a different operating system, because now it'll be interpreted differently. So as a key principle, never ever have two files that differ only in the case of, the uppercase, lowercase of the file. And as much as possible, just be consistent in how you use uppercase and lowercase. So my rule of thumb, my lazy rule is I just try to use lowercase for everything if I possibly can. So Othello, docx, all lowercase is good. Romeo, dash and dash. Juliet is good. Here at the bottom though, we have two examples. So we've got Othello, all lowercase, docx, and Othello with an uppercase O, docx. Some operating systems will assume that they're the same file name. Other operating systems will assume that they're different. And generally I feel like things like this, like Romeo and Juliet, where one name is capitalized and the other name is not, is just a recipe for disaster. Everything lowercase makes everything nice and simple and less likely to give yourself a headache a little further down the track. Okay, next principle, use your separator characters wisely. So one thing that you've probably been wondering, looking at it so far, is that I've sometimes used a hyphen, so like a dash, to separate things, and sometimes I've used an underscore to do it. Use these things wisely. So the general suggestion I have is a hyphen means different words that are part of the same chunk. So for example, if you've got the play Romeo and Juliet, that whole title is part of the same semantic unit, right? Romeo and Juliet is the title of the play, in the same way that Othello is the title of a different play. So this is a delimiter, or a separator, within a chunk. That's how you use hyphens. Underscore is a way of separating different chunks. So like say if you want to make the distinction between this bit is the title and this bit is the author. So here's what I mean. One type of chunk might be an identifier that specifies which reading number is it in the reading list. So it might be reading 01, reading 02, and so on. You could have another chunk which specifies the author. So that might be Shakespeare, Plath, and so on. I don't know what syllabus would involve both Shakespeare and Plath, but let's just assume there is one. Then you've got another type of chunk which specifies the title, so Othello or the Bell Jar, etc. And notice again that within a single chunk, our separators here are dashes, they are hyphens. And you might have another chunk which specifies which part of the document it corresponds to. So this gives you file names that look like this. So if I say that I'm going to have a structure that says all of my documents, all of my readings that I am including for this particular class will have this structure here. It will be first the identifier chunk, then the author chunk, then the title chunk, and then optionally there might be a section chunk. So, and the chunks themselves will be separated with underscores. So now we've got reading 1, new chunk, that's why we've got an underscore there. Shakespeare being the author, Shakespeare being the author. Another new chunk, Romeo and Juliet, and then because apparently we've got separate files for Act 1 and Act 2, you can see that there is now a separator. There is another chunk there at the end. So now you've got this systematic way of naming all of the files that you've got in such a way that you know that the first chunk is always going to tell you the reading number, the second chunk is always telling you the author, the third chunk is always telling you the title, and the fourth chunk, if it exists, is telling you which part. Okay, and that will make it a lot easier for you to later on figure out, oh crap, I've got to revisit, it was one of the Shakespeare ones. Okay, let's have a look, let's search, and you could even do this in your operating system. You can go type into Spotlight or whatever your operating system uses for search. You can go searching for the word Shakespeare and it will bring up the Shakespeare plays. Yay! That's the idea. Okay, so I'll stop there. That's the key. I'm trying to keep these videos short. So here I finished with some of the principles that make names good for machines. In the next one, I will talk about names that humans tend to like. Okay.